Hello and welcome to my review of Nexomon. All the gameplay you'll see in this video was captured on a PlayStation 5 console, but the game's also available for PS4, Xbox One, Xbox Series consoles, Nintendo Switch, PC and even mobile phones. Unfortunately, there's no physical copy currently available, but perhaps there will be down the line. Also, I need to let you know that a review copy of the game was provided to me by the publisher. For anybody who's new to the channel, I do my reviews a little bit differently to what you might be used to. Firstly, I like to give you all the factual information on the game, and then I move on to giving my personal opinion on various aspects of the game, both positive and negative. Then I'll end the video with a conclusion and recommendation section. And remember, if you enjoy the video or find it useful, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. I'm aiming to get to 1,000 subs before Christmas, and I can only do that with your help, so please do consider subscribing today. So then, what's Nexomon? Well, it's a monster catching or monster taming turn-based RPG in obviously the same vein as Pokemon or Temtem. This game may have come out of the blue for some people, so let me try and explain why that might be. Nexomon has actually been around for quite a while now and has 2 games in the series. The game that we're reviewing today is the first game in the series, but its release date is the 17th of September 2021. So now you're probably thinking, well, how does that make any sense? Well, this game was originally released in 2017 on mobile phones with microtransactions and all that kind of stuff. But after a while, the developers decided to rebalance everything and take out the microtransactions for a PC release. That version was a full game with absolutely no microtransactions to be found, and on top of that, they updated the phone version to remain free to play, but you can pay roughly, I think, £1 or $1 to unlock the full game. After some time passed, the developers released a sequel known as Nexomon Extinction. That game came to PC and consoles right away and has been available digitally and physically for a while now. So why am I reviewing the first game now? Well, that's basically because this is the first time the original Nexomon has been available on consoles. And I know that was kind of a lot to go over, but I felt it was important to let you know what's going on regarding releases. So I won't be spoiling any of it here, but the game does feature a relatively long story, which will probably take the average player around 15 to 18 hours to get through. But if you want to complete everything in the game and catch all the Nexomon, you're probably looking at around 30, maybe 35 hours of game time. This game is set a number of years before the events of the sequel, and you play as a kid, as you usually do in these kind of games, who sets out on an adventure to save the world from the Nexomon King. You can rename your character and choose between a male or female avatar. Very soon after booting up the game, you'll be picking your starting Nexomon partner. You'll have 7 different Nexomon to choose from who can all evolve and can all be found elsewhere in the game. Nexomon doesn't have 2 versions of the same game, which means that everything is obtainable within the one game. There's over 300 Nexomon to catch in the game, and each one has the typical stats you might expect: HP, attack, defense, etc., and of course a type. The types here are normal, mineral, wind, water, fire, electric, and plant. Some of the types are stronger or weaker against others, as is usually the case with monster taming games. The sequel, Nexomon Extinction, actually added 2 more types to the game, Ghost and Psychic, but they aren't available in the original. As you probably already guessed at this point, a lot of Nexomon can evolve into more powerful monsters when they reach certain levels, and of course, those levels are gained via XP that your Nexomon receive from battles. Battles are one-on-one, turn-based, and if you've ever played any Pokemon game at all, you'll probably understand how it all works. You take turns picking attacks to use, and some deal damage, some inflict status effects, you know, that kind of thing. Your team can include up to 6 Nexomon and can be built however you want and customized to your liking. As your Nexomon level up, they will unlock skills to use in battle. When a skill is unlocked, it simply appears on a chart. You can then equip up to 4 skills to use at one time. You don't ever need to forget or lose any of the unlocked skills, you just choose which ones you'd like to equip instead. Again, as you may imagine, you can discover wild Nexomon hiding in the long grass, and you can capture them using Nexo traps. The standard red Nexo traps are very common, and you can buy them from stores dotted around the game world. There's also gold Nexo traps, which are much rarer than the red ones, and they catch any Nexomon first time, every time. You'll also be finding and buying the standard items like potions, ether, revives, repels, and more besides. But honestly, there really isn't much more to tell you about the game that wouldn't spoil anything. It's very similar to any popular monster catching or monster taming game that you've seen or played before, so let's move on to the personal opinion section, starting with the positives. Something that I want to note in this section is that this game, and basically any other monster catching game, is inevitably going to be compared to Pokemon. There's just no escaping it, but I've actually made an effort to play Nexomon on its own terms and review it based on its own merits. So far, I've only referenced Pokemon as a way to kind of explain its systems to you, not as a weapon to beat Nexomon down with like a lot of other people seem to want to do. I've seen so many people and places calling Nexomon a Pokemon clone, and if that's what they truly believe, then fine, it's their view and they're welcome to it. I personally believe that the world is allowed to have more than one monster catching game in it, and Nexomon does a lot of things right in my opinion. Firstly, the monster designs. As I mentioned earlier, there's over 300 Nexomon to catch, and I think a lot of them honestly look really cool. Now, is every single one of them a sort of perfect and amazing design? No, but frankly, I think they've done a much better job with this game than Game Freak did with Pokemon Sword and Shield. For me, Sword and Shield was probably the worst mainline Pokemon game I've played, with Gold and Silver being my personal favourites. I think the problem is that when you start up a new Pokemon game, yes, you're going to see some new Pokemon, but you're also going to see and catch a lot of them that you've already seen or caught multiple times before. Nexomon's creatures just feel very fresh to me, and if you go in without looking anything up like I did, you simply won't know what kind of monsters you'll end up discovering or what levels they evolve at, if they even evolve at all. For me, the monster designs and pretty much the whole game overall brings me back to a time when Pokemon wasn't oversaturated and you didn't know exactly what to expect. Not that I dislike Pokemon or anything, I've been a fan of it since it came to the West in the early 90s, but it just doesn't have that same impact that it used to, at least as far as I'm concerned. And something else I really appreciated was the writing and the humour. Obviously, I'm not about to tell you that the story and the characters are absolute masterpieces of writing, but the game's written in such a way that older fans of the genre would understand it and be able to sort of read between the lines. A child can easily sit down and play this game with absolutely no issue, and they'll most likely understand what's going on. I mean, there's no swearing or actual violence, but they use humour to point out some of the absurd things that have occurred in other monster taming games, things that are rarely questioned by the characters themselves. A lot of the humour is delivered via a robot character in the game called Atlas. He often says things that we're probably thinking and points out how stupid things are or why a character did a certain thing the way they did it. There's a line early on where he warns us to be careful because this isn't a video game, and little things like that are peppered throughout the story. I found it to be very fun to read and it genuinely made me smile quite often. And I think the third and final thing I want to talk about in this section is the presentation and visual quality of the game. Due to the fact that people's wants and needs are generally different, I think some players would have liked this to be presented in perhaps a pixel art style, or maybe would have wanted 3D models, but what we actually have here is somewhat a mixture of pixel art and what resembles flash animation. You do notice that the moving characters are often a higher resolution than the backgrounds and areas that they walk through, but I don't think it looks bad or jarring at all. I personally think it looks really good. It's got nice sharp lines and bright colours, with some pretty well detailed environments both in the overworld and the battle screens. Everything you're seeing is only from the starting areas of the game, but of course there's plenty of other biomes to explore, such as forests, snow-covered areas, caves and volcanic paths with lava all around you. For my tastes, it's just a really solid and pleasant game to look at overall. And so that about does it for my main positive points, so let's move on to the negatives. In all honesty, this section is going to be relatively small. There really isn't too much bad to say about this game, but here we go. The main problem I think people will have with this game is that it's being released after Nexomon Extinction. And what I mean by that is Nexomon Extinction is everything this game is and more. Extinction is, I think, the better game in virtually every way, and considering this game has now been released after Extinction despite being an older game, it will probably feel like a step backwards for people who've already played Extinction. That's not to say that Nexomon, the original, is bad, far from it in fact, but it simply is just a slight downgrade from the second game, which I would bet a lot of people have probably played first. And really, that's this game's only and biggest issue, not being quite as good as the game that's already been available for a while. If this game had been released on consoles in 2017 instead of just mobile and PC, it would probably have fared better. I mean, if you imagine a kid playing Nexomon Extinction on their Switch, and then this game, which is just simply called Nexomon, releases, they may be a bit confused about it. The story does occur a number of years before the events of Extinction, but it just isn't quite as polished due to being adapted from a free-to-play mobile game. I just think it's going to be in a weird place for a lot of people, and that may hurt its sales or its desirability. But in regards to everything else, I've really had no negatives to speak of. It's a basic monster catching game with everything you'd expect, and I had no crashes, glitches, or problems at all. I mean, okay, perhaps some of the monsters could have been designed a bit better, and maybe there's some slight balance issues in places, but overall there was nothing that really bothered me or dragged down my experience, so I think it's a good time to move on to the conclusion and recommendation section. I think Nexomon is a very playable and very competent monster catching game and turn-based RPG that takes clear inspiration from the most famous of them all. It's got everything you'd expect in a basic version of a game in this genre, but nothing over and above. The sequel, Nexomon Extinction, is the better game, but it doesn't exactly fix this game. It would be more accurate to say that it simply adds to it. However, this game stands easily on its own, and while you can tell it's not exactly a AAA game, its asking price is incredibly fair, and I think you get a lot of game for a very little cost. Is it perfect? No, of course not. What is? But you can pick up this game and its sequel for less than the price of one Pokemon game, and considering how I personally feel about the recent efforts from Pokemon, it's an easy choice for me to make. So I think if you're a fan of Pokemon but you're also open to trying other games in the same genre, then I would easily recommend this game to you. To me, it's kinda like playing a modern version of perhaps Pokemon Red or maybe Ruby and Sapphire, and I think you'd probably enjoy it. And if you do decide to pick it up, I would highly recommend the sequel as well. If on the other hand you're someone who sees anything that looks like Pokemon but isn't Pokemon as some kind of rip-off or clone, then I don't really know what to tell you. If that's your mindset, you're of course welcome to it, but I think recommending Nexomon to you may be a bit of a waste of time. However, if you're willing to break out of that mindset and actually try something else, you may be pleasantly surprised to see what other developers are doing with the genre. I would urge you to try it, but at the end of the day, it's your call. I've personally found both Nexomon games to be a breath of fresh air when it comes to catching and raising collectible monsters for battle. It doesn't exactly reinvent the wheel, but I don't think it needs to. In my opinion, not everything has to be groundbreaking. Not everything has to be the next big thing. The developers of Nexomon clearly didn't set out to be a Pokemon killer, so to speak, but they ended up producing a fun and creative monster taming game that is absolutely solid and worth your time, especially for its low asking price. If you have any interest in this game, support it, give it a try, and if you like it, by all means, grab the sequel. This term is somewhat overused these days, but I genuinely feel this series is overlooked and is an absolute hidden gem. And furthermore, I feel like it deserves a lot more praise and attention than it actually gets, just for the sin of not being Pokemon. So I would simply say that if this looks interesting to you in any way, please do give it a try. And there you go, that's my review for the original Nexomon. The game is already out on PC and phones, but it will be available on consoles from September 17th, 2021. That includes Nintendo Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series consoles. As of right now, there doesn't seem to be any plans for a physical copy, but the sequel got one, so perhaps down the line this one will too. If you want to pick up the sequel as well, it's available for download on all platforms except phones, and physically on the Nintendo Switch and PS4. If you have any questions about the game, feel free to let me know in the comments section and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, please consider subscribing to the channel, and if you want to support these videos even further, all the important links you'll need are in the video description down below. But with all that said, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.